Really fun, action driven, great story building. I've said it before that I think Kirkman's strength is that while he does satire and things that deconstruct the superhero genre or the genre that his stories exist in, he also creates very new, unique, and idiosyncratic experiences for the genre.
I want you to resist. I'm not here to save you. I'm not here to spread the greatness of the Viltrum Empire. I'm here because I enjoy this.
Welcome, everybody, to Blerdlines. This is your man, Cam. With me, as always, is...
You can find me at the Lone Wolf and Cub on Instagram.
As well as...
It is I, Conquest, also known as Josh. But Conquest has hair.
and closing this out...
It's the professor. I'm D, and I'm here.
And we're back. We just wrapped up, was it season 3 of Invincible?
Yep.
That's what it is? Yeah.
Season 3.
Season 3 of Robert Kirkman's Invincible, adaptation from the 2000 comic. Which, wow, it's been that long since that comic came out. Yeah, I got to give it to them. They firing on all cylinders and enjoying their life right now.
Yeah, really fun, action-driven, great story building. I've said it before that I think Kirkman's strength is that while he does satire and things that deconstruct the superhero genre or the genre that his stories exist in, he also creates very new, unique, and idiosyncratic experiences for the genre. As you can see with the difference between Invincible and The Boys is that with Invincible, you actually care for the world and the characters and this narrative that's being told, as opposed to just kind of watching this very extreme parody of the superhero figure and their actions and the thing. And largely, The Boys show has kind of become more a deconstruction, unpacking of that marriage between pop culture and the obsession, consumerism, and the obsession with superheroes. But here in Invincible, for season 3, we continue the journey of Mark, not only learning how to be a superhero, but reeling from his battle with Angstrom Levy at the end of season 2, in which he very viciously and brutally stopped him and murdered him, at least what he thought. So I think the story, the continuance of that, and building from the materials that are available to the writers in the comic book and the source material, you see this really cool an epic story that delivers some really great. And when you think about it, it's daring because it's 50 something plus minutes per episode, which is different from most animated TV shows. So in and of itself, it's kind of put itself in a position to be bold, because as for animated television, at least in America, you're 30 minutes at the most before the attention span is trying to look to something else.
100%.
And so to have a full, almost hour-long animated serialized show, each week I'm looking forward to that next episode. I couldn't wait for the finale of this show. And this is one of the rare shows that I watched week to week, episode to episode, after they released the initial first 2. Everything else that has come across, my screen recently has been like, I'll just wait for it and then I'll binge it later if I do that. And I'm including Doom Prophecy, Daredevil, some of the other live action stuff that we've talked about. So just the fact that its storytelling structure is very different than all the other animated shows and stories that it's in competition with is already a bold statement. And I think they just elevated it even more with how they told the story in season 3 as we continue to see this obvious epic build up to an inevitable Viltrumite versus, Viltrumite Empire versus Earth's heroes and maybe a few other allies. And they tease it very well with the fights that they have in the show. And they're very brutal. They are very brutal fights. And also I love Beast. What is it? Beast?
Battle Beast.
Battle Beast. And the fact that that's Michael Dorn, it's a nerd. I mean, if you have watched Star Trek and you know Star Trek, all you see is Worf Unleashed. That's all you see.
Let me add, the total running time for each episode was a thing that kind of didn't turn me off, but I was curious. I was like, can a show run for 50 minutes, 45 minutes and keep my attention? Plus, I have to mention that I'm also watching this on Amazon Prime with ads. So to have a show, this is just a testament to how good the show is. To have a show that is that long in running time for an animation, and then I'm watching it with ads, and it still holds my attention, is just saying that this is really good writing. They put it together well. I would also say the same thing about Watchmen, but on a different level. But we can get to that discussion a little bit later. But Invincible is well written. It almost makes it believable for animation. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's just very engaging. I'm intrigued. I don't feel like
it operates like a live action serial.
Yeah,
a serial drama. And I think that is what I was mentioning. That's very rare, and it's a bold step for an animation. Now, I'm sure there are other examples out there in terms of the running time and the way it flows, but I think that's what it is.
Yeah. So
definitely
every character I care about. It's rare that I don't like when they go to a certain character. Like I'm like, oh, I'm ready to go to the next character. Every character has an intriguing storyline and journey where I'm very invested, and I look forward to each segue. I look forward to each ending of a character and how it's going to end and how do the characters react to these. They have real world problems in dealing with death, but it's in an animated form, very adult like. I couldn't even watch this in front of my daughter because I totally forgot. I was like, oh yeah, this is very violent. I was like, okay, let me put this on my phone and watch with the headphones. I just think it's very, very well put together to the point where I was so far behind, I had to binge season 2. And I just got into season 3. So, I mean, whatever, spoilers be damned. But that's how good it was, where I sat there. I think I was like, just started season 2 days ago, and 50 minutes per episode on average just to get through that. It was a long endeavor, but I was willing to deal with that because, one, we spoke so highly of it. I knew it was good. It was just a matter of me just sitting beside the time to get through it and just me catching up. And I'm chatting to you guys offline. I'm like, dude, Mark's getting his butt whooped, to like, oh, Mark's gotten stronger. Oh, okay. And then I meet Anissa. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And then, you recognize all the character actors, the voiceovers. I'm like, oh, that's such and such. The Q and the, what's the meme with, oh boy, from Wolf of Wall Street, when he's like, oh, whoop, 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 whoop. I know that voice, so to wrap it up, enjoyable show, very well put together. I don't really have too many complaints. I don't even have a complaint at all. But it does suck when you're trying to binge something in a short amount of time. It's 50 minutes, so good luck with that. But overall, kudos to the staff.
Yeah, man.
They don't make it so easy for you to. And again, that's another reason why it's operating in the kind of a mode that you're used to with live action serial drama, where you really have to watch Invincible each episode and pay attention to what's going on. Because if you don't, you'll miss important narrative details, and not just the stuff that's spoken, but the stuff that's visually shown to us. And it's constant world building. And I think that's what I didn't understand about what I was getting into when I first, because I didn't read the comic. And when I first saw season 1, I thought I had in my mind, I say, okay, this is like The Boys all over again. It's just a different tact. That was what I thought going in, but I was pleasantly surprised that this was more of an effort to, this isn't angry white guy shouting at the rafters story about how pissed off he is about the DC and Marvel people not letting him do what he wants. This is a guy who's like, I've loved comic books, I've loved superheroes, but I have something to say about the genre. But I'm going to do that in narrative form.
And it's a proper deconstruction.
Exactly. And it makes it a proper deconstruction.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the interesting part for me was I read the comics as it went, so I was along for the ride. And so my introduction to Kirkman was in Marvel, and then I had heard he had done like a Walking Dead thing, but I didn't really get into it because I'm not a zombie person. And then I started to catch up before the show came out. And so then I was like, oh, okay, dude, this dude's dope on how he does his narratives, how he does a lot of his dialogue. That's a really good thing. And so when Invincible came out, he kind of said that. He was like, yeah, I've been doing zombies for so long. The only other thing I did was, random Marvel books, and then Battle Pope, actually. That's a deep cut. But he was like, yeah, I want to do the world's greatest superhero comic. And so I liked it because I was reading it and I was like, yo, I'm in episode 7, but in episode 3, he threw somebody into space. And in episode 7, he goes to space and passes by the corpse of that same dude. And I was like, that small little like thread to keep that consistency was something that I enjoyed. And it kept that through all the comics. There was actual consequences to all of his actions. That, and he kept getting his ass whooped all the time. And it never goes away. He gets a little bit better, but he gets his ass whooped. And I actually kind of like that. Every episode, every book, he does stupid things. He gets manipulated. He does one thing thinking it's a good thing. 5 to 10 issues later, it comes back to bite him in the ass. Like that kind of a thing. So Kirkman enjoyed using that as well. And then also too, like the book was fun because like you said, it perfectly critiqued the types of archetypes that we're used to. So in our mind, we're like, oh, cool. There's a car is racing to go hit a baby, and then he's going to go and save it, and then sometimes he misses, and then the baby dies. You're like, oh, and then that person whose baby it was comes back to him 28 issues later as a supervillain, and is like, yo, you killed my baby, and this is the consequences to it. So the one thing I would give Kirkman was for the book, he had a lot of fun just really playing on all those tropes, flipping them on their head, and making people actually get out of their preconceived notions of what a superhero is supposed to do and be. And I like that he bounced it. Like, there's not a thing where like, oh, I can't kill people because of blah, 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 where Mark goes back and forth pretty much his whole journey. Like, so he's like, first he's like, nah, I can't kill people. That's wrong. Then he's like, oh no, these motherfuckers need to die. And then he goes back, and he flips back and forth because as his life experience goes. And then
he's also still a human being. And
yes.
that's the side of, for many years, that as much as they've tried, and they've had some really great books and stories with their characters. I'm talking about Marvel and DC and many others, in terms of really reconciling the human aspect of that person that is not the God side of that person. I think, again, many examples, but Kirkman did it well here with Invincible, where you never forget that Mark is a human being at the same time as this incredible, extraordinary being that can do these incredible things. Sometimes you forget Clark Kent entirely when it comes to Superman.
Yeah, exactly. Josh, what was your thoughts? You're mute.
I knew that. I think the beauty of what you and D were just talking about in terms of his vacillation between, I'm not going to kill. That's not who I am. That's who my father was. Versus, like where he winds up at the end of season 3, where he's like, if the next dude that threatens me or my family or people that I love is going to buy it, like everybody's going to have to buy. Like everybody's catching it if that's what you're going to do. I loved that they used Oliver as the vehicle to teach him that lesson or to get him to that point. because Oliver was just wilding. And I mean, he would do what, let's be honest, a little kid with children will do, as a father, children will do what you allow them to do. And if you don't temper their thought process, if you don't teach them things, they're going to just do, and they're going to do the most. They're going to do the most that you let them do. And so if you have a kid like Oliver who can lift a building practically over his head, he's going to be like, why shouldn't I kill them? And you have to tell him why. And it's a great lesson that he learns over time. And you see that he chills out off of that pretty quickly. It's really good. But then the juxtaposition there is Mark is the one who's like, you know what? Oliver had it right the whole time. I taught this kid the wrong lesson. And I thought that was a really good, it's not a great place to land just in general, but at the same time, I thought it was a really good thing to sort of use Oliver as the means to teaching Mark, to getting Mark to this point, not teaching Mark that he should, but getting Mark to the point where he's at the end of that episode. And I mean, everything in balance, because there's some people who absolutely should have bought it way sooner. And then there are other people who like, you know what? Like what he learned with Powerplex. Powerplex on balance probably should have been off like 4 episodes ago. But he realizes A, dude is insane. And then B, there's a reason behind his he's a tormented soul who's very, very unbalanced. And so you can't, in his mind, in his thought process, you can't just go off killing people just because they did a bad thing. There's nuance to it. And I think they use Powerplex to great effect to sort of show that Mark is seeing that there's a balance to these sorts of things until he meets Conquest. And then Conquest is the one who has him where it's like, yeah, I can't afford to do that. Like you see, and I think the beauty of the last 2 episodes back to back, as soon as the season was over, I went back and watched those 2 episodes bracketed back to back. And the scale is one of D'Angelo's favorite words, scale. The scale and the consequences of not killing Angstrom before, not really killing him. I mean, he tried to kill him and just didn't.
He thought he killed him. I mean, to his credit, that was not, he couldn't have known what Angstrom had, all of what he's got going on. Nobody could have guessed that. But that is part of, but if you take those 2 episodes together, that's part of what teaches Mark that. I want to refrain from saying it teaches him the lesson. He gets to the point where he decides, you know what? I'm going to just have to start killing folk. Like, it's people, if you threaten me in mine, you're going to have to get off. That's just what it is. That now. And that's a good point about Oliver, because you're right. Oliver didn't understand why it wasn't okay to just indiscriminately, summarily dish out punishment and execution. He didn't understand that. But Mark didn't understand why sometimes those hard decisions have to happen. And sometimes people with the most power have to make them. And I think that's sort of what's been the great thing about Mark, is he's not called invincible because necessarily of his physical strength. And I think Kirkman does a good job of driving that home by having him get beat down physically all the time.
Every episode.
It's because Mark finds a way through his humanity to sometimes, or he doesn't, to deal with these problems. It didn't work with Powerplex, but that doesn't mean he's going to give up or stop.
Well, there was a valuable lesson that his dad, Nolan, taught him. In order to survive, you have to be as brutal as a Vitramite. And there was a fight in season 2 where he was there to help his father protect the planet of his second family. And he was like, Mark, you got to listen to me. In order to win, you have to kill them.
Yes.
That is the only way.
That's their nature. That's all they understand.
Yeah,
And
anything less, and we're gonna lose. Like
you're gonna
everybody's
die
brutally.
brutally. So, like from Nolan to Mark, from Mark to Oliver, there's a cultivation of character development between each of those.
That's a really great point. That is a really great point. There's a through line, and it's almost in reverse, right?
Yep.
You see Nolan now becoming more Mark-like, whereas Mark, I'm sure by the end of this journey, is going to be more hardened like Nolan. And we see foreshadowing of that in the most low-hanging way through the marks of the multiverse. Something happened to each of them that hardened them to the point where they embrace more of their Viltrumite side. You could see that some of them still held on to that humanity, but for the most part, all they had left was that Viltrumite side. So you know that there's a certain point where there's going to be that intersection of destiny where you make that choice that puts you on that path. And Mark, our Mark, the prime Mark, hasn't faced that decision yet. And that's what those multiple Marks and Angstrom and all that is building towards, that he is eventually in Conquest, his fight, he's eventually going to have to make a choice that is going to be the one that changes everything for him. He hasn't had to do that yet.
Exactly. And I think they even did even with the way they did the multiverse was good. Like it was quick, easy, simple. You could understand it, get in, get out. All right, we're already moving on to the next big bad.
It makes sense. You see different versions of Mark based on different experiences, based on different choices.
Super simple.
But all of them have a semblance of Mark.
Yep. Super simple, super easy. And I think we're at a level now that people have heard the word multiverse so many times that being able to see it in this simplicity, you automatically get it and you don't have to think harder than that.
But I think part of, if I can pivot for a second, something that jumped out at me, and I'm in my brain, I made sure to make a mental note to make this comparison on the pod. Watching the scale of destruction that happened, like basically those 18 marks, I think it was, 18 different versions of Mark destroyed most of the world. Like
the infrastructure and killed millions of people.
It killed a ton of people, and
just fighting each other.
Yeah, just well, initially they started out just wrecking.
Yeah, they were wreaking havoc, but then
yeah. And so it occurred to me. It occurred to me the scene in Man of Steel, where Zod and Superman go at it, and there's all this death, all this destruction, but it's like sanitized because A, nobody seems to have really been hurt. B, it seemed like it was just destruction for destruction's sake without any real ramifications. There was no emotional, oh man, Metropolis is really jammed up right now. Like they destroyed like half of downtown Metropolis. There was no.
Or the next film, that fight killed like billions of people. Right. They did have the wall, but that was that. I don't know if that was that Zod. I don't know.
That was in Justice League, I think.
Yeah.
Can I add one real quick thing just to piggyback off of Josh's comment? The only time I've seen what the aftermath of a superhero town is done is kind of in The Boys, where the superheroes make a mistake and accidentally kill somebody, and you're like, dude, like not to a full extent. Like when they have a big battle where Superman's fighting Zod, we never get to understand what's going on in the city, like the destruction of a city
on the ground level. And you're right for The Boys, yeah, definitely.
I would say Justice League, the animated series, is another one.
Yeah, that's another one too.
Well, there are a few times where like a volcano is going off and they're evacuating the city, or I forget what the thing was that happened where basically the city is destroyed, and so
don't reveal that because Cam is watching, and I recently watched.
Oh, you haven't? Right. I'm sorry. Right. Yeah.
So a newcomer, and I want him to experience that. That's why
you need to experience that cold.
Yes. That is
almost there.
McDuffie brilliance.
Yeah, I'm almost there.
Shout out to the GOD, Dwayne McDuffie.
And you'll notice a lot of milestone characters pop up in Unlimited, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
and
done well.
very much done well.
But yes, so the bigger statement that I was trying to make was about consequences. Like, thing happens, and the result of that, or the backlash, the aftermath, the result of that thing is this other thing. And so, either it's just the ripple effect of impact on the people around it, decisions that people make as a result of the big thing that happened. Like, it moved something forward. And it moved, in this case, it moved a bunch of stuff forward. The entire planet is weakened, and then a Viltrumite show, like by other marks. And then in the aftermath of all of that, as they're cleaning up, they haven't even like put a Band-Aid on some of the cuts yet. And then this dude shows up, and it has the dual effect of catching them when they're weakest, but catching Mark when he's done. At the end of that episode, when Conquest shows up, Mark is like, I don't know if you noticed what's going on around me. Like, buildings destroyed, cities in shambles, people are hurt, and I'm really frustrated. You show up at a really good time, because all I want to do right now is punch the crap out of somebody who can take it. And basically the entire next episode is that.
It's those two. You know what it reminded me of? And I don't know if Trammell, because he would be a part of, maybe too young or maybe a part of that generation, but Jeff Trammell, the creator of the show, if he was trying to tongue-in-cheek reference the old Dragon Ball Z standoffs, because that's what it felt like. It was when Conquest shows up and he's like standing there, and then Mark has that, they have that exchange of dialogue, and then the episode ends. I was like, that very much felt like the old school Dragon Ball Z, how they ended most of the episodes.
I would wager that like since Dragon Ball Z first debuted 8,000 years ago, when that style of combat, with on-screen combat, was introduced, I feel like everybody emulates it. So whether intentional or just like that's the gold standard of the scale of that type of fight, and how you represent that in animation, whether it's something you want to emulate, it's where you have to go now. Like, we've all seen Dragon Ball, at least a little bit of Dragon Ball, where like these dudes are like fighting across countrysides. They start in the city, they end up in the mountains, and then they leave the mountains, they end up in a canyon, and they're just like jumping through the city and like clashing into each other. And, the camera pans out, and it's really just small dots with these sonic booms that keep splashing out all over the place every time they come into contact with each other. And then you zoom in, and it's them like, blocking each other. And like every block is like this huge wave of air pressure, and like all of that, like the Matrix. You can't get away from it now. You have to have, there has to be some sort of display of ripple in terms of the use of their power. And when you have two beings that have that much power come together and basically just punch the crap out of each other, it can't just be, I'm going to punch you and then you fall, and there's a dust cloud. I'm going to punch you, you fall, there's a dust cloud, and oh, by the way, the entire block that you just landed in gets obliterated by the force of your landing.
Yeah, and also the thing where they and they do it egregiously is the loss of limbs, the breaking of the bones. When Conquest takes them and flies through a crowded beach, and then just like he just smashing through people and limbs.
But it wasn't even their impact. It was the
velocity.
Yeah, it was the velocity.
It was both. It was both.
The sonic, the boom that followed. It was,
but also there's the bit where Conquest decides, you know what, we're gonna turn this up a little bit now that you've warmed up, now that you're into it, and you realize what's happening, and then he like rifles him through a building and then dumps him on the pavement. And just as you're about to forget that they just rifled through a building and that there might have been people in there, when bodies start falling out of the building and landing around
well, they
them.
showed you before those bodies falling as he was doing what he was doing.
Yes.
The fact that they fall and hit after he's finished doing what he was doing,
yes,
it shows things. It continued to show that
Yes.
the amount of collateral damage that happens when these beings are at each other's eyes, it's unavoidable.
Yes.
You cannot avoid it. And then B, it also showed that they got down there very much faster than those
than anything else coming down.
They're moving at a speed that is inhuman.
And also too,
details.
It's the details that add to it. And I think for going back to like something that we're watching where there's an actual villain, like a bad guy. Like there's no humanizing. Even his monologue, he wasn't being humanized. He was just telling him, he's like, yo,
he was horrible. He was horrible because he's a horrible person.
Exactly. And he's like, I've been bored. This is great. And I love that.
You pissed them off about something, and you know what? I don't even care what it was, but because now I really get to cut loose.
Yeah.
And you did this for me, so I appreciate that.
So good. So good.
And Jeffrey Morgan, it was like hearing Negan as
yes. But just a quick side note, I feel like this is the thing that's missing from Marvel, because there are some bad guys in the Marvel Comics universe that are just straight like, you know what? I'm just here to wreck things. I'm not trying to steal. I'm not trying to rob a bank. I'm not trying to steal jewels. I really just want to destroy the world. Don't even ask me why. I don't care. I don't have a reason. I just want to cause problems. And I feel like Marvel, the movie universe, the cinematic universe, has gotten so something. I don't know what the thing is. I don't know what the thought process is. But they've gotten so whatever that thing is, that they've now gotten away from sometimes a villain is just a villain. You know 100%. What I mean?
And I think that's the part that makes their heroes weaker, because now there's no consequences, right? Like that's what we were talking a little bit about No Way Home before, because D'Angelo watched it. And part of the reason like it was fun to watch it is because Green Goblin was being mean for me just to be sake of being mean.
Just because he is.
And it was and that actually made
also positioned in a great way. He's an apex predator. And
100%.
even without having to say that, the things that he did and how he presented it to Peter was all about that. We are gods. We can lift, incredible. We have incredible strength. We won't grow old. We don't get sick. Why should we be bogged down by this morality? So that was why he made such a great antagonist, but also a supervillain, because you can't do anything but fight him, because he's too powerful and he's not going to stop on his own.
And that's also why, Thanos in the comics has always been a good thread, because his motivations have never changed. He's trying to impress death. So that means let me kill as many people as I can so I can gain her favor. And most of the time she looks at him like,
Which is why, and to just as a quick side note, which is why Thanos wins works so well, because it's that one drive, and it sticks the landing in terms of staying with the motivation of, I have to impress that. Like she has to know how much I love her, what I'm willing to do in order to impress her, to the point where he goes to the lengths that he goes to in Thanos Wins to win. And he doesn't really, and just perfect cherry on top is he doesn't realize that his own death is the thing that will satisfy her. It's just, it's so good. It's so.
Because I was going to say
that Josh didn't mention that, but Thanos Wins is the name of a book. It features Thanos, and he actually achieves the thing that, as Cam and Josh pointed out, he pursues relentlessly throughout his existence in the Marvel comic book universe. He gets it.
At least since Infinity Gauntlet in 90 somebody, 96, 95, whenever that was, the original.
This was 10 years, almost 20 years after Infinity Gauntlet or whatever?
Probably 20.
Like that, 15, 18 years.
We've been 30 years. It's been like 25 to 30 years. And his whole thing this entire time, and he finally gets it. And he doesn't realize that how he was supposed to get it. But he has to use older Thanos has to use younger Thanos to pull off the thing. That's how the extreme he had to go to, using time travel to pull another version of himself into the future where he's killed everyone else. And Lady Death is still not satisfied because technically you haven't killed everybody. You know why? Because you're still alive. Genius.
So here's the thing.
Irredeemable.
The villain arc works for Thanos in the comics, but not necessarily for Marvel. My counterpoint to that is, for me, in the live action, Baron Zemo was the ultimate villain.
Even better example, yes.
So, but in the movies, because I've read the jump off with Thanos humiliating this one dude every birthday, and just doing the most heinous stuff. That's how much of a villain Thanos is. But in the live action, to me, Baron Zemo was the ultimate true villain in the Marvel Universe live action movies.
Yep.
My small opinion.
How he was introduced.
Yeah, totally agree.
You get scared to disagree.
Yeah.
If we're talking about evil for the sake of evil, then no, his motivation was built on revenge and vengeance of wanting to destroy the Avengers because of that. I don't know if he ranks in that as being evil. I don't know if he fits in that same posture as Green Goblin is what we're talking about. I think he still is a grounded, very human motivation, whereas Green Goblin was saying, I'm beyond human. Like, this isn't, I'm not even putting my us in that same category and why I'm doing what I'm doing. But definitely effective, one of the most effective villains in the MCU in terms of winning. He actually won because he fractured the Avengers, even though 3 movies later, kaput, the stakes are reversed. But he did provide a challenge for them. Probably he could have been more, but yeah, I agree. Effectiveness, yes. Evil, no. I would say
fair point.
Not evil for evil's sake.
Yeah, I would say that in the MCU would probably be, ironically, Green Goblin, maybe Hela, because she was evil for evil's sake.
Well, and I think that speaks to character motivations, right? Like every other character, their motivations are split between this bad thing this thing happened that made me do the thing that I'm doing, and it makes them. And I think it's one thing to have motivation; it's another thing to make them sympathetic. Like, or some bad guys are just bad.
Like Killmonger is too relatable for a whole chunk of the audience. You can't spin him as a bad guy the way you're positioning him.
Yeah, right. Anti-hero at that point.
Yeah, well, he's an anti-hero or anti-villain in that he's positioned as a villain. He's doing villainous things, but in actuality, he's doing them in for a noble and altruistic cause. Now, they tried to wrap it back to him being more self-motivated and power-hungry in the end, but it didn't work, and it didn't make T'Challa look better. It just that whole film, the story made the Wakandans from the beginning look bad again for the whole of most of the Black members of the audience who were all raha about being there were behind Killmonger. You had a good chunk behind T'Challa and the Wakandans, but it was the same kind of philosophical difference between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And neither one will be seen as right or wrong by the Black audience. So again, you have a whole chunk that doesn't accept Killmonger as a villain. And that's because of the way you position him, because you chose to tell the story that way. If you position these characters in certain ways, you get the effect you want. But because they wanted to sail into that disingenuous, wavy waters of trying to be diverse and trying to make a commentary on racial relations in America. Now imagine that. They avoided it for almost 15 years. How long before we got Black Panther?
About 15 years, yeah.
And you, not only that, but you have all these Black characters that are original Black characters, superheroes that you could have included. And I like Black Panther, don't get me wrong. I'm not mad at him being the first one in it, but I'm just saying, if you want to make a statement, you want to try to be genuine about this thing, then why not take a chance on somebody like the Blue Marvel, Adam the Blue Marvel, or someone, or another story. You introduced Sam Wilson, lackey to Captain America. You introduced Rhodey, lackey to Iron Man. You introduced all these guys that I don't mean to diminish their role. I'm just saying they are the second fiddle to the character that they stand behind.
Yeah.
But you have other characters. Blade, again, they didn't have the rights to Blade, but they do now, and look how they're struggling to get them on screen. I mean, if they hadn't gone that route with Black Panther or anything and just stuck to forget about the real world politics, stick to your in-world politics, stay at that, and build from there. Make Killmonger more of a terrorist or some jaded former Wakandan, and go from there. You can still get the same effect and have a great story.
Yeah.
It's just now you don't have the added baggage of the burden of representation because you don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
You don't know how to handle that. I'm not saying don't put it there. I'm saying if you're going to do it, you got to go all the way. This had to be back when you first started introducing Black characters into this world, because it never leaves us. We're always with it. And that's just the reality. But if you're not serving up real reality, then stick to yours and we'll be satisfied.
And the church says amen. Well, and to bring it all the way back to Invincible, what we're basically saying is, because of the real world consequences that Invincible has and the way they treat it, especially when it comes to the villains, when it comes to the scale of things, like the world gets fucked up on a general basis. And so they do these things and they touch on real world things in these moments, in these nuances, without having to be the overarching arc, right? Marvel does it. Marvel has to hit you over the head with it to let you know, hey, see guys, look what we're doing. We're saying the thing. Where Invincible will do it in subtle ways as things go on. And I think that they make sure that when they have villains that are villains, they are straight up villains. But if there's villains with nuances, you can get to see the nuances. And you can kind of see if things went a little bit another way, they might have went another way. And so I think for Invincible, what they've done really well, and this is a testament to the comic, is they've captured a lot of the essence of the comic, and then they fleshed it out even more. Because there's a lot of, like, a good example is Rexplode. Like, in the comics, he's pretty much a dick. That's pretty much his character. He's supposed to be like that pretty much the whole book until he gets killed. And so you're kind of like, whatever about him. But in this one, they give him a little bit more of a nuance. And shout out to the voice actor who also was in Big Mouth. He's also in The League. Jason.
Yeah, he's in The League.
In The League as well. Yeah, in The League as well. He murdered it. He's just really, really good. And I think for me, overall, for Invincible, the biggest thing that I like, the voice casting, probably one of the best I've seen in any cartoon that's American led, because they just have a really good time of who they picked, how they picked it. Seth Rogen as Alan the Alien is great. Michael Dorn in Battle Beast is literally just giving him his own like spinoff or like a movie, or doesn't matter. Just do something. I want
Shout out to Sterling Brown.
It's Sterling K. Brown as Angstrom.
You cannot forget Sterling K. Brown as Angstrom Levy. I mean, Nemesis, like that. That dude,
and whoever is doing the voice casting went to the Andrea Romano School of Voice Directing and Cast, because it's not since Justice League. Like, Justice League is the last time that I remember hearing this many celebrities being used to such a great effect. But I mean, this is like a whole other. I thought Kevin Smith's Masters of the Universe was going to be like that, because he's another one that has a jam-packed roster of really goodness. Not to shout out to Kevin Smith. By no means am I saying that Master of the Universe is not good. It's not this. It's just not Invincible is the thing. And
you also
I feel
see
like
the influences of Justice League in this, right? Like, you see those influences, like just, and even in Young Justice, like you can see those influence where they're pulling their. We mentioned Dragon Ball Z earlier, but you can see the influences, Dragon Ball Z, Justice League, and Justice League Unlimited, Young Justice, because all of those have dealt with, as Josh pointed out earlier, where they take those moments to deconstruct the idea of vigilantism and heroism and what that does to the everyday, to the ground.
Yeah, totally. And I think the also give those Korean animators a raise, please, because they was killing it the whole thing.
Well, everybody complained about
turnaround from last season
one. Everybody complained about season one, and they have leveled up since then. It's a lot cleaner and a lot better in general since season one.
Answer me this, because I watched the end of season 2 recently, and there was a scene where they were at a Comic-Con convention, and he was talking to one of the writers, and they were basically, it was like an inside joke.
Yes, I love that scene. That was one of the best moments, and that's what I'm saying, how they can deconstruct and still tell an amazing story. And that was straight up parody or satire, where he's like, yeah, we have to do these other things you probably don't notice, but we do them to save money. Like when you see the back of a character's head and you hear their voice.
And then they did the whole thing as he was saying it. Yeah.
Yo, man, animation's expensive.
But that was the point, and I love that. Like, they're like, yes, bottom line, it takes money and time to do this, which is why it was amazing that they turned around season 3 so fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's why I thought about that when I saw that season 3 was debuting. I was like, thought about that episode in that moment. I was like, maybe they were saying that it was worse during COVID, but now they're getting it back to, together, because it was quick. And this season was probably the best animation yet.
Yeah, and they it'll be back. I think it's supposed to be back next year, like beginning of next year. So, but yeah, I think for me, it's one of those things where I still appreciate old school animation where people still draw their animation and it has a feel. The things I've been watching recently, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, Watchmen as well. Like that's by Studio Mir, and they've been a really good job of doing 3D and toon shading. And like it jars you a little bit. If you buy into it, it's actually pretty cool. And if you don't, it feels weird and stiff. But I buy into toon shading and all that. And so, and then Josh says it. So, but I appreciate that for this, they did a really good job of their animation and how they're doing a lot of their character designs and keeping it and then updating it to a point of nuance. Because I think, this book came out in the early 2000s. And it hit really well in comics in terms of the satire and all that kind of good stuff. And so being able to take that, adapt that for now, and still keep that same essence, really, really, really good. Really, really good. Final thoughts because we're not going to see this again until next year. Trying to think. I think, I would say the one thing I like about the show overall is my thing is the voice casting. That it hits every single time. It's my favorite thing. Somebody else?
For me, it's I like the voice acting, but I also love the world building and the general structure of the storytelling. I cared about all those characters. Each season, I care about all the characters, even the ones that are bad guys. And it's a brilliant kind of deviation from some of the recent stories. So yeah. Love the story. Love the way it's being told.
Yeah, Cam?
I haven't tuned out yet, so that's a good thing. And note to self, don't wait so long to watch the episodes because they're lengthy.
And Josh? As he says his monologue on mute.
Shut up. It's I think for me it's the escalation. They've figured out, Robert Kirkman has figured out how to sort of start at point A, and this is the mark of a good writer. You start at a point A, and then you build the world around point A, and then you move to point B, and then you expand that world. And you throw in more characters, you build the characters, you sort of make the reader or the viewer care about those characters, and then you throw that entire world that you just built with all these characters that you now know into complete turmoil for the next however long, and you just keep upping and I say all that to say the escalation. Where he started out with just, a bunch of aliens coming through a portal that couldn't really stay here that long because they aged however much faster, and they kept coming back and they kept coming back. Like that versus where we are now, those aliens it looks silly looking back on it compared to what Mark is dealing with now. And it's a testament to Robert Kirkman's ability to sort of stair step the stakes and the scale and the things that your hero has to deal with. He did it with Walking Dead, which is why, like, you watch the show and cool, yeah, all right, especially the first few seasons, okay. But then you read the books and you have a completely different appreciation for what he created and how, again, he's a master at creating that staircase of escalation, and things just keep getting worse. They just keep getting worse. I would love for him to write an X-Men book. Joss Whedon is another one. Starts at point A and then just steps. And
there's always something at stake for the characters, and each time the stakes take them further and further, push them. It's like the maze. You're getting further and further away from the center each time because of all these different obstacles that happen. And I think he's really good at it, and in a very layman way. Like, his stuff is not complicated. It's not, you don't have to have all these other references in your mind or whatever to appreciate it or to really get into the experience of the narrative. So yeah, I agree with that. Like, his style is very, very well done. He would be a great writer for an X-Men or something of that nature.
Yep. And we're going to leave it on that. Everybody, thank you for rocking with us. Invincible was amazing. Hey, Sage. And we'll see you guys later. Peace.
Say peace.
Later.